Right, so now we're going to be adding authentication, but before we do that, we need to do a lot of things. We need a route with the sign in, and we're going to do the sign in and the register at the same time. What else? We need to add a route to do this. This route is going to have forms because we're not going to use Google authentication. We're going to use just regular email and password authentication, something else. Okay, so first we need to create that sign in route. So I'm going to go right here to components. I'm going to create a new folder that is going to be called sign in. So something like that. That makes sense. Inside sign in, we're going to have a new file, signin.js. And then of course we're going to have a CSS for this. So signin.css. So just like we did previously with the forms, we're going to create a template to render forms. We're going to create a reusable component. So it's going to be a class. Remember that on the state, we can have all the manifest of all the inputs and validation and everything else. So we're going to use a class. So it's going to be import and then React, and then we bring component. Right. And then from, and then React. Good. We did this like a million times. We're going to import that CSS. So it's styles from, and then we include / and then sign in CSS. Since we're going to have a class, so we say class sign in and then extends and then component, just like this, open and close, and it extends. Good. We're going to have a state. For now, it's going to be empty. That's good. We're going to do a lot of things right there. And then we need to render something. And this render is going to have a return, and the return is going to be returning just a div, saying, I don't know, whatever, maybe something, sign in. That's good. Div, open and close, sign in. Good. We need to export this. So export default and then sign in. Good. So everything, it's good, just a minimal template. So now we need to go to routes and include this sign in. So I'm going to say import sign in from open and close / components. It's going to be inside sign in, and then we include the file, right? Right. So now we need to add the route, and I'm going to say route open and close. Now, if I go to the project and I click, because we've already have this, I click right here, we have sign in. This is the route. So I'm just going to copy of this so we don't have to change it later. It's going to be path. It's going to be equal to / sign in. Then we have exact, and then we have the component that is going to be equal to whatever we are importing right here. Since we are using sign in, I'm going to pass sign in. The application is going to reload and we get sign in. Okay, so we get the keyword that we are just rendering right here. So now we need to create the index right here, the manifest for all the inputs inside of a form data, just like we did previously. But in this one, I'm going to show you a different way. We're going to do it on a different way. Previously, when we were on the form section, we added only one component, something like, I don't know, forms, something like this. And this forms was rendering all the inputs that we had on that manifest. But now we're going to be doing this a little bit different. Now we're going to create one component that is going to be, for example, an input. Let's pretend an input. And this input is going to be returning whatever we have on the first keyword. Let's say we have an email, it's going to be rendering that email. And then we're going to be adding a different one that is going to be, I don't know, the password. And this one is going to render the password. So the thing is, the benefit about doing this is that between components, we can add whatever we want. And the other way with the form sections, the previous section, when we were just discussing forms, we could only add one component, and then it's going to be rendering all the components inside this one. So we cannot add things in between. So, but this way, we're going to be able to add things in between. So, okay, so that's what we're going to do. Let me go back. And first, we need to kind of create the manifest of all the inputs. Now, if you remember, we have a common class that is going to be an error if we get an error from the server, from Firebase. So I'm going to create a state for register error. And this register is going to be the same error for login or register. Then we're going to be adding a loading. Whenever we are just sending the request, there's going to be a little bit of time. The request to Firebase takes time. So we're going to be changing false and true whenever the application is loading. And then we're going to have our form data. And the form data, let me make this just like this. And the form data is going to contain all the inputs, the index of all the inputs. So right from the start, we're going to have an email and we're going to have a password just like this. Make sense? Good. Now the email, we need to do all the configuration for the email. So the email is going to be, not an email, it's going to be an element and it's going to be an input. That's the nature of this element. Of course, it's going to have a value. And whenever we change the state of this value, the application will show what we are typing, remember? Then we have a config, if you remember, config. And the config is going to take all the elements, all the properties inside this input. So, just an input element in a form is going to have a name, and I'm going to be adding a name, email input, something real simple. Then we're going to have a type. And the type, since it's an email, it's not going to be text, it's going to be email. Then we're going to have a placeholder, make sense? Placeholder. And the placeholder is going to be enter your email. Good. We're going to have validation. I'm going to add it right now, but we're not going to really use it for now. First, we're going to just try to render the inputs. So we're going to have a validation. I'm going to add it now, then we're going to use it. So of course, the email is going to be required. What else? We're going to be checking if the user type a valid email. So we're going to create a rule for email. Then, if you remember, we have we have the status of the input, if it's valid or not. At the beginning, it's going to start at false. Then we have a touched, and the touched is going to be false. And then we have the validation message. If the input is not valid, we're going to be rendering whatever message we get right here. We did this previously. Okay, kind of looks good. Now we need to do pretty much the same thing with password. So I'm going to copy all of this so we don't have to type it again. And I'm going to paste it inside and we're going to be changing things. It's not going to be email password. It's going to be password input. Good. The type is going to be password. What else? We're going to have enter your password. Now the password is going to be required, and then I'm going to be adding a password. And this one is going to be checking some rules for the password. It's going to check that the password is greater than 5 characters or something like that, whatever. Good. So looks nice. So I'm going to save this, and now we need to start making the template. So first we need to start rendering things. We didn't have a place where we can process all of this. We're going to create this in a minute. But for now, I'm just going to create the everything else, the structure for this. It's going to be class name, and I'm going to be adding a class name to the container. So it's going to be styles and then log container. Makes sense. What else? We're going to have form. So I'm going to be adding form. And open and close. Right. Okay, what else? What else do we have? We have, for now, nothing else. We just need to we need to start and creating the thing that is going to be processing all of this. Okay, so I'm going to save the sign in. Of course, right now, we are not going to get anything. And I'm going to go to widgets. Now, inside widgets, we're going to be using all the form fields. We're going to be processing all the form fields. So I'm going to create a folder that's going to be called form and then fields. Now form fields is going to have, of course, 2 things, the actual index file, and I'm going to call it the same way, form fields.js, and we're going to have a CSS, of course. So it's form fields.css. Now this form fields, we don't need to use a class-based component. We can use just a functional component. So we'll import React from React. After a while, this is just always the same. Like I told before, you should be using snippets. On the next few sections, whenever we hit the Redux and everything else, I'm gonna show you a plugin we can use with the VS Code to generate all of this just by default. So it styles from, and we're gonna be adding this form fields.css. Now I'm gonna create a const, which is gonna be a functional component, and it's gonna be form fields, right? This form fields is gonna be receiving some arguments, and I'm gonna open and close. And for now, we're gonna return something. So I'm gonna say return open and close, and right here I'm gonna say div, and right here template input or whatever. We need to export it, so it's gonna be export default and then form fields. Form fields. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. So now we need to import this code inside the sign in. So I'm gonna go right here at the top and we need to import it. So it's gonna be import, and then it's gonna be form fields. Should we call it the same thing? Yeah, form. It's gonna be form field because we're gonna be rendering a single input each time we call it. So it's not fields, it's singular, form field. Good. So then we have from, and then dot forward slash, and it's gonna, no, sorry, dot forward slash, and then it's gonna be widgets. We have it right here, forward slash, form fields forward slash, and the actual file. Okay. So now in theory, if I do form field right here, I call it include the component, we should be getting something right here. So we get template input. Now the idea of doing this is that right here we're going to be passing a lot of props, and this one is going to be rendering the email. And then if you wanted to, we could add more things right here and then just copy a call to a different form field with a different ID that is going to be rendering the password. And we're going to be getting two, but we get this in between. We have the ability to add text or whatever in between. Okay. So for now, we're going to do just one form field. Now this form field is going to be passing some props, and it's going to be all the props about this this input, the first one, the email. So we need to, pass the data. So I'm going to go to form fields, and this form fields first is going to send the ID of whatever we want to render. In this case, this input, this form field is going to be for the email. So I'm going to be using email. And notice that this keyword it has to be the exact keyword we have right here at the top. It's going to be email and then password. If you type a different thing, the application, the form field is not going to find this inside form data. There you go. So, okay, what else? We need to pass the state of this email, inside here, form data, we need to pass this. Okay, so I'm gonna say form data, just like that. It's gonna be equal to something. In this case, is this that state that form data and then email. Good. Now we're gonna be needing a change property, so I'm gonna include it right now. And for now, I'm not gonna pass anything. But remember that we need this function to update the state. But for now, I'm going to leave it empty. So I'm going to save it. Nothing is going to happen, of course. Oh, sorry. Of course, if I cannot include anything, I need to at least add something. So I'm just going to do it right now. The change, remember, is going to be receiving the new state. So in this case, I'm going to say element, and it could be new state, whatever. And this one is going to be calling to a function that is going to be updating the component. So I'm going to say update and then form, and then it's going to be passing whatever we are getting from this element, the new state. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to create a function that it's not going to really do anything for now. So it's going to be called update form. It's going to be receiving an element, and it's going to be equal to a function that for now is not going to do anything. So I'm just going to leave it just like it is, and at least we get something. So now what we need to do, we need to add all the logic inside form fields so we can find the email, loop the form data, and create the template. So we're gonna go to form fields. Okay, so form fields is gonna be rendering this template. So I'm gonna create a function that is gonna be doing this. So it's gonna be called render template. Make sense? This render template is going to be, it's going to use a function. So I'm going to create it right now. Render template, same function. And for now, it's going to do nothing. Good. Now, right here inside sign in, whenever we call form fields, we are passing things. Now, this form fields is going to receive props. Now, instead of passing the props and then making a reference to props.something, what I'm going to use destructuring, because we only get 3 different things right here. So first, I'm going to use destructuring. I'm going to use the curly braces, and I'm going to get whatever we have inside form data and store it as form data. Then we're going to have a change function, and then we have the ID. So now, instead of doing props.formData or props.change, we're just going to do form data, just like this. So I'm going to delete this, and we're going to start creating the template. So first, we need a template. I'm going to say let, and then form template, just like this. And at the beginning, it's going to be null. Okay. If you remember, we use a switch to, to match whatever type of input we have and render something. So we're going to use a switch, open and close. We're going to be checking whatever we have inside form data. So since we are sending the form data, the data that has to do with an email, we need to check the form data and the type of element. If it's an input, we're going to return something. So I'm going to go right here, and we're going to be checking the form data dot element. Good. And then, of course, we're going to do something. In the case that we have an input, type input, we want to return something. And then, of course, we do break. And then we're going to be adding a default case. And you always need to add a default. If not, you're going to get an error message. React is going to tell you need to have a default case. And we're going to be returning the form template we have on top, that is going to be null. And at the end, we return whatever we have inside form template after we run the switch. Right, so form template. So in this case, we need to start creating the template. So I'm going to say form template, and then of course make it a little bit nicer. And inside form template, we're going to be returning some JSX. Now, for now, I'm just going to return a div, just to check that it works. So, input, whatever. I'm going to save it. And okay, so we get input. It's matching the case of input. And so right here, we need to create all the logic and create the actual input with the properties and everything else. This video went too long already, so I'm gonna just end the video and go to the next section, and we're gonna be creating, the templates and everything else, which is gonna keep going on this.